podcast. So, you guys, as you obviously see, we are going back to the old ways of the podcast. Just kind of me talking to you guys, kind of giving you guys my thoughts on things. So, first of all, I want to thank you guys for being patient with me with these whole Star Wars related podcasts. I know I kind of originally talked about doing this as a Star Wars-ish podcast, but I kind of have obviously veered off my own way on doing things. But that's okay because in all honesty, man, I mean, I've got a lot of other interests and I'm definitely going to try and, venture out a little bit more than just doing Star Wars. But I also wanted to get back into doing the Star Wars talk, especially as of late. I've had a lot of different things going on in my mind, a lot of different, topics I wanted to go over. And also, I just want to also say I bought a new microphone, so I hope I'm coming through clear enough. Definitely let me know if I am not, and I will do some configuring. But so I decided to wanted to do this podcast kind of as in a weird way, like a part two to a podcast, or I guess more of just a little live stream I did about a year and a half ago called Defending Disney Star Wars. I essentially said on there that I really felt like there was actually something in all of the Disney films that somebody could like. But today I'm not going to be talking strictly Disney films. I want to actually take some time and talk to you guys all about why I personally think that the sequel trilogy is not as bad as everybody is saying that it is. Of course, obviously, we are going to be diving deep into The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and of course, The Rise of Skywalker. If you guys haven't seen Rise of Skywalker, definitely going to tell you now, we are going to be talking very in-depth about the movie. Also, all the other ones, which I would assume everybody has seen. But again, if you're popping in here, you haven't seen any of the Disney stuff, probably just turn this off, go watch them, come on back, and let's have a great, lively discussion. So, when it comes to the sequel trilogy, the reason I actually enjoy it for the most part is because, again, I'm going to probably re-quoting myself here quite a bit from my previous video that I did quite a number of years ago. For me, there's like some kind of weird, again, almost Disney-ish magic to them that really just can suck me in. Because, I mean, obviously, number one, I'm going to willingly say it, and this is something you can disagree or agree with. That's kind of the whole point of doing these podcasts, because I like hearing everybody's opinions and topics and everything and whatnot. But I really feel like these are definitely the best looking of the Star Wars films. Not just to, like a high standpoint, comparing them to, the original trilogy, because obviously, of course, I know we can all definitely come to an agreement that they're never going to be up there when it comes to the original trilogy. But see, now for me, every single one of these films for me has been enjoyable. I will even willingly say it too. About a year and a half ago, I had my own little, I guess we can word it as like a toxic fit. I know, obviously, a while back here, I talked about the toxicity within the fan base of Star Wars. If you guys haven't went and listened to that one, definitely head on over, listen to that podcast, because I go pretty in depth, unfiltered about the toxicity within the Star Wars fan base. But I constantly bashed on The Last Jedi, which, of course, as I'm sure everybody knows, everybody on the internet in some way, shape, or form has either talked ill about the film or has praised it to be one of, if not the best Star Wars, or even just of the sequel trilogy in general. As if you guys have known me for a while, you guys know I do have a lot of mixed feelings on The Last Jedi. I definitely don't think it's a tier one Star Wars film, but it's also not the worst of all the Star Wars films. Me personally, I don't want to say it's the weakest of the sequel trilogy, but again, just the bottom of my list because I just have too many mixed feelings. There's things I really like, things I really hate, and there's things again I'm just very mixed on that make sense, but at the same time don't make sense, if that makes sense. So I want to obviously kick things off with talking about The Force Awakens. And the first thing I want to just get done and out of the way talking about this film is, of course, everybody's first perspective of the film. It's just a retreading of A New Hope. Yes and no. The reason why it's yes, because, you're getting your main character on a desert planet. They're going to a base, basically, of course, Starkiller base for The Force Awakens, the Death Star for A New Hope. It blows up at the end. And of course, obviously, you get, Luke, Han, Leia, all your big legacy characters in there. But the reason no is because it is vastly different. Like, our main cast in this film is very different. I mean, you got a rogue stormtrooper. You've got who is supposed to be one of the best pilots in the entire Resistance. You've also got, of course, Rey. You got her as a scavenger. And you also got, for me, I'm going to continue to say it, the best character in the entire sequel trilogy, Kylo Ren. Now, when I first saw Kylo on the big screen, and even when I saw him in the very first teaser trailer, of course, all you could see was his back, and all you could see was his lightsaber ignited. I obviously, of course, didn't really know when I first saw it. I just kind of thought, that's not really what a lightsaber is supposed to look like. That's not how the blade is supposed to be. It's supposed to be solid, not flickering and all that. But after, digging in deep, after actually seeing the film, watching the trailers and seeing how Kylo Ren is, I was very interested. And I still do think personally throughout the entire trilogy, he's got the most consistent arc and even just like the most consistent storyline throughout the entirety of the sequel trilogy. I'm going to try and get these newer characters done out of the way first before I actually start jumping into the legacy characters, because I know, again, some people have problems with it and some don't. But also, again, you got Poe. You got him as the, best pilot in the Resistance and all that. But to an extent, I can kind of see how they're trying to make him more into like the newer aged Han Solo. He's very, reckless. He's just willing to get in there, get things done. Of course, obviously, we all see how that turns out. Finn helps him escape from the Star Destroyer, crash land down on Jakku, where, of course, they end up running into and meeting Rey. And I'm still going to say, you guys, I know a lot of people have problems with it, but Rey is not a Mary Sue. especially now, even after watching The Rise of Skywalker. I mean, some things make sense, but I will still agree that, yeah, she should advance more just by actually training. But we'll get to that a little bit later into the podcast. But the new characters, they all have very interesting and very different personalities, which is what I really enjoy and really like about them. Again, Kylo, I mean, he really just is the first dark side user you actually see who actually gets to be seen growing throughout the trilogy. He's not just in one specific area. You like legitimately get to see him grow in the dark side, grow as a character. Or Vader, you just see, when we first see him, he's just there on the screen. He's just already a bad guy. And then, of course, we get to, the prequel trilogy, and you get to kind of see how he becomes Vader, but we never get to really see a Darksider grow. That's why I enjoy Kylo Ren. And, of course, I know, again, more problems, but Supreme Leader Snoke really actually was a very interesting character, I thought, when it came to the very first movie. I was a little, again, torn on his portrayal within The Last Jedi, but we're going to continue to talk about The Force Awakens. I'm going to probably jump around quite a bit, which, if you guys have listened to my podcasts, I jump around quite a bit, especially when I'm doing the solo run here. So, again, yes and no to it being a retreading of A New Hope. I know from what I hear, J.J. Abrams likes to play a lot of things safe when he does films, and I actually didn't even have a single problem with the way he started off the trilogy. I actually thought that the sequel trilogy actually starts off very, very well. Because, obviously, the people who want to say it's just a retreading of A New Hope, that's because he wanted to give us something that was just familiar, something that would actually want to bring us back to that galaxy far, far away. Not just give us something completely different. Give us something that we're not familiar with, talking about characters. Because I've said this quite a number of times. I've even talked to certain people about this, is I really just think and feel like even if we didn't put the legacy characters into The Force Awakens, or even just this new trilogy to begin with, people probably would have been mad. And I actually really think the way that the legacy characters were actually put into these films, I actually thought they were handled very, very well. I personally still will say I think this is the best Han Solo we've seen. Because, of course, yes, he does leave Leia, because, of course, he's very broken, very destroyed about Kylo killing all the Jedi at Luke's temple and everything. So he just kind of leaves, goes back to his entire old life, just to kind of avoid Leia, essentially. It makes sense, but I will also still say, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Because at the same time, they really should have just stayed together. And they still should have, obviously, of course, talked, worked things out. Because I eventually either want to write it down. I want to either make a video, maybe even talk about it on here someday. But I kind of want to do my version of the sequel trilogy. Because, of course, obviously, I want to rewrite The Last Jedi. Because there's essentially, again, the things I don't like, or the things I'm very mixed on. I think I could actually make kind of a more linear story that actually will flow a little better, and it won't retcon everything that happened in The Force Awakens, and it'll still tie in and smoothly go into The Rise of Skywalker. But that's kind of, a here or nor there kind of thing. It's just more of a, what do you guys want to see? Do you guys want to see me do that? If you do, let me know down in the comments and or in the chat. But back to the film. For me, The Force Awakens is the best of the sequel trilogy. And I never thought I would say that about a first part of a film, because my listing of all the Star Wars films have kind of changed. Like, it's not that I'm not a fan of the first film of, the original trilogy, or I'm not a fan of the first film of the sequel or the prequel trilogy. For me, I just still feel like it's the strongest opening. And I know people are going to agree. I know a lot of people are going to say A New Hope, but this is just my perspective. This is just my opinions that I want to tell you guys. The sequel trilogy opener, The Force Awakens, hands down best movie theater experience of all time. That's honestly a big reason why it's higher up on my list. And that's why I praise this film so much. Why I honestly even say it's the overall best of all the Disney stuff that's been put out so far. It's better than Last Jedi. I will even say, even as much as I absolutely loved the film, it's better than The Rise of Skywalker. It's better than Rogue One. It's better than The Mandalorian. It's better than Solo, a Star Wars story. And, I will say, it's obviously, of course, I'm going to get this out of the way too. I should have probably said this at the beginning of the podcast, but I know it's not a perfect trilogy. I mean, we can kind of all agree on that. I mean, you can definitely tell the way all these films are going that there really wasn't a plan, period, for this trilogy. And especially, too, you can definitely tell through the entire story arc of the trilogy. Again, the only character I thought was handled very well was Kylo Ren. But I also, again, I feel like if JJ wouldn't have, I'll even say it again, play it safe, we probably wouldn't have, maybe gotten a film that people would have liked. Because The Force Awakens, to my knowledge, from what I've seen on the internet and from talking to people, that The Force Awakens actually was very liked. It actually, not only just did well in the box office, not only scored a high like 91 or 92 on Rotten Tomatoes, which Rotten Tomatoes, you don't really need to agree with that. It's just how you kind of perceive the film. Like, again, me personally, I had an awesome, fun, amazing time watching The Force Awakens. I loved every single character. I will definitely say this was Hux's film. He definitely did the best in this film. And he'll be another character we're going to talk about here within this podcast. I don't really know how long I'm going to go for. We're just going to see where this leads to. Because I know for The Rise of Skywalker, I've got quite a bit to say. Because The Force Awakens, I'll be honest, you guys, there's not really a lot that I can say about it that hasn't been said. Everybody, again, retreading of A New Hope. Yes/no. Very, very strong and good start to this trilogy. And the characters are all handled very well. I'm not going to say either that, the lightsaber duel in it is bad by any means. I actually think it's a very different take on a lightsaber duel. And again, yes, I know once again all of the Rey stuff, how she's just kind of naturally just starts getting more and more powerful in every single film. Especially somebody who's never wielded a lightsaber before was able to beat Kylo Ren, a Skywalker, with Skywalker blood pulsing through his veins, the heir to Vader's throne. And sorry, I was trying my best to try to quote Snoke, but can't exactly remember because it's been quite a while since I've actually watched the other sequel trilogy films. So I'm sure I'm going to come back to it a little bit, but I think let's get into The Last Jedi because, of course, obviously, a lot of people have their praises, have their negatives. Again, I'm that middle guy. I can enjoy it for what I see, and I can, hate it for the things that I don't like. Because again, about a year and a half ago, I even made a video bashing Rian Johnson, saying how I don't think Rian Johnson should get his trilogy and all this other stuff. Again, my thoughts on a lot of things have changed, especially again with the toxic fandom that's been going on here over the last number of years since Star Wars been back in the eye of the public and everything. The Last Jedi, I'm going to say, for me personally, is watchable. Obviously, of course, the things I don't like in the film, Luke throwing the lightsaber. I will willingly say I wasn't the biggest fan of Holdo. I wasn't the biggest fan of Rose. Again, nothing against the actress. I know she was just doing what she was told to do and what she was scripted to do. So I have nothing against Kelly Marie Tran at all. I liked a lot of what they did. Again, Kylo was handled probably the best in here. Everything between Rey and Kylo was handled and just done so good. Like their connection throughout these films is so just strong, so interesting. It's really the overall best thing, in my honest opinion, in the sequel trilogy. Agree, disagree. Again, everybody's prerogatives are completely different. Some other things I didn't really like. I wasn't the biggest fan of Canto Bight. Again, I know they're trying to do some Empire Strikes Backish kind of things, but you're never gonna get up there with the Empire Strikes Back, of course. You're never gonna capture that good magic that Bespin Cloud City got for everybody else. Canto Bight, I'm going to still say I agree with about 90% of the fandom. It was just kind of a wasted time, kind of a wasted good 15 to 20 minute arc of the film. You definitely could have done something so much better with it. But again, I won't hold it against Rian Johnson. He was just trying to find a way to tie the certain things together. Things I did like. I will still say it. The final act of this film, everything from when Yoda returns and talks to Luke, and they have their little back and forth banter. The fight with the Praetorian Guards, everything in the throne room of Snoke's, everything that happens on Crate. I love it all. I think it's actually personally the second strongest ending, the strongest second or third act, of all these films. Even as much as I love The Force Awakens, I do still think, I don't want to say it's the weakest third act of any of the other films, but I guess essentially that's what I am saying. But at the same time, though, I'm going to willingly say, too, even after watching The Rise of Skywalker a few times since it's been out, I've come to actually like and appreciate The Last Jedi more and more every single time I watch it. Because it seems like even every single time I watch it, there's something more and more I like about it. It becomes a little bit more watchable for me. Because, of course, the sequel trilogy, every single film I've seen it one time in theaters. And then day one, it's out on physical copy. I go, I buy it, I come home, I watch it. And even so, the first time I watched The Last Jedi, since I went to it in theaters, I still had that same awkward feeling of I don't really know how I feel about the film. There's just something more and more with each and every time I watch it. There's something more that I like about it. I find it a little bit more of an intriguing story. Even though I had a problem with Luke, I've actually come to see kind of why he is the way he is in the film. To an extent, it makes sense, and at the same time, though, it still really doesn't, because it might not be your Luke Skywalker, but it's the way Luke Skywalker is now handled. Because, of course, now everybody who's grown up watching the original trilogy, and I think that's kind of where some of the problems lie with certain fans. Not saying anything bad about it, but I feel like that's where certain fans have a problem when they say that's not Luke Skywalker. It's because they grew up watching the original trilogy, seeing the heroic Luke Skywalker who stood up to the Emperor, who was able to sway his father back to the light and turn him back into Anakin Skywalker. That's the Luke that they're looking for. They're also trying to find the Luke from the now Legends continuity of the comic books, of the graphic novels, of all the novels. Because apparently Luke is just a lot more powerful when it comes to him actually being in those films as well. Or novels. See, my brain just gets all kind of mashed up when it comes to me doing these kind of podcasts because my head's all over. I try to write things down beforehand, but I just kind of decided to wing it, just kind of see what happens. I'm sure it's going to be a bit of a jumbled mess. We can all say it. We can all say it right here, right now. This is episode 9 of my podcast, so we can say this is going to be the rise of Skywalker out of all of my podcasts so far. It's going to be a jumbled, jumpy mess everywhere. And now I want to get into the rise of Skywalker because this film is now actually surprisingly generated more hate than The Last Jedi. And again, I'm one of the fans who actually enjoyed the film. I'm one of the actual fans who was very satisfied when I walked out of the theater. So for me, this was the end game of Star Wars. Of course, I'm going to say it's not up there in the hype that was Endgame for the Avengers, but this for me is my new ending to the Skywalker saga. My Skywalker saga didn't end with Return of the Jedi. It ended with The Rise of Skywalker. I walked out happy, crying, super satisfied. I kept looking over at Victoria, telling her I blown away. This film was beautifully shot, beautifully choreographed. I even said too that I actually thought that this film had a lot of things that the other two films didn't even have, in all honesty. The score is the best of the entire franchise. The cinematography was perfect, point, amazing. And I actually thought that the acting in this was actually the best acted. Even though, the people had problems with the Emperor coming back, I kind of have started to accept the fact now that it does kind of make sense that the Emperor is back because he's always been the puppeteer. He's always been the guy with the strings. If you guys want, go back, check out my last podcast. Me and Sean Chandler, we kind of somewhat talked about it a little bit. We brought it up. But I will still say it. The mixed feelings are still there when it comes to that topic with the Emperor returning. I still think that JJ could have found a way to actually bring back Snoke. But like I said, I honestly I have nothing negative to say at all about The Rise of Skywalker. Everybody did a great job. I actually thought the story, even though of course there was a lot of jumping around from planet to planet to planet, like so fast. The opening was actually very, very good. Like, it was actually a very exciting opening, We get Poe, Finn, and Chewie going to this base, getting this information from the spy within the First Order, and ends up being a light speed chase through space, and that was very, very exciting, and I really enjoyed it. That Star Wars guy, you like the sequel trilogy? That's cool. I'm not against it. As a Star Wars fan myself, Well, thank you. I do really appreciate that. Also, all the stuff with Rey. I know it's a little strange, kind of, with her, doing training with Leia, because we never got to really see a lot with Leia. Of course, though, through these films, we actually get to see her kind of use the Force a little bit more here and there. We get to see actually even a backstory a little bit, and even a little snippet of what her training was with Luke, which I thought that scene was gorgeous. That was so well done. Even though, it was, you could definitely tell it was CGI'd with Leia's face for sure. Mark Hamill's face looked spot on. Like, it was pure gold. I also kind of like how they slowly revealed that Rey was a Palpatine, but of course, again, that's also one of my mixed aspects. I kind of liked how Rian Johnson actually handled her. I actually liked the fact that she was going to be a nobody, because I thought we could have entered into a new era of Star Wars with, all the Palpatine finally being gone, finally defeated, finally dead, and all the Skywalkers can just finally rest and not have to worry about a Palpatine. Which I actually is another reason I really enjoyed the ending of the film. Because in a sense, essentially, even though basically a Palpatine survived, but it's always been a battle between the Skywalkers and the Palpatines, because they're the two strongest, I guess, essentially families within the Force. But it's been the constant battle, Palpatine and the Skywalkers, and it's kind of nice how she keeps the Skywalker legacy going, but she finally puts to rest the Palpatines. She is, regardless, by blood, a Palpatine still. But she shuns the name away, because I don't think it would have really went well if all she'd have talked to that old woman out there in the desert at Tatooine, and she'd have been like, Rey Palpatine. Because then all of a sudden, oh my lord, it's a Palpatine. They're still around. They're still alive. Obviously, of course, Skywalker is definitely a, hopeful name. Because, of course, you have Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one. You have Luke Skywalker, the last hope of the galaxy. Even though she doesn't go by, even though it's Organa, but you still have Leia Skywalker. So for me, it was actually a touching moment. I've watched the film a few times. I still completely cry every single time she looks at that old woman and says Skywalker. Because again, she's not taking the name of Skywalker. She's continuing the legacy of the Skywalkers. And I actually really like that because, again, the Skywalkers are just the biggest hope within the galaxy. You had Anakin bring balance to the Force. You had Luke Skywalker as a new hope bring his father back to the light. So it's not essentially that she's taking the name of Skywalker. It's just more what the name of Skywalker means. And that's the thing I love the most. That's the thing that I truly, truly adore and love about this film. But so many people have a problem with that she's now donning the name of Skywalker. And again, even though, again, I had my mixed aspects and my mixed feelings with the Emperor, it was still really cool seeing Ian McDiarmid be the Emperor once again, because he definitely nailed it. Nailed this role. It always seems like the third act of a trilogy, Palpatine's there. He's always the best. Because, of course, obviously, Revenge of the Sith, we get to finally see the Emperor rise up, create the Empire, defeat the Jedi, kill all the Jedi with Order 66. And then, of course, obviously, his iconic role in Return of the Jedi. I'm definitely still going to say I really think he did the best in Revenge of the Sith. His second best is definitely going to be Return of the Jedi. Because, of course, that's actually when we see him finally, we get to see him. That Star Wars guy. I love your video. I know it's off topic. I would love to see a Darth Vader and a Star Wars bounty hunter movie. Actually, I just talked about this last week with my guest, Sean Chandler. We were having a little discussion. Well, it kind of started off more as how we thought Solo should have actually been a Disney Plus series because it could have been fleshed out a lot more. We could have seen a full episode of him talking, getting the Falcon, playing Sabacc, all his little adventures they play through. I've actually suggested this before, and I actually would like to see this as a Disney Plus. My vision of this would be takes place immediately after the meeting that Vader has with Boba, Bosk, IG-88, and Dengar. And they all go out. They're all searching the galaxy. They're all looking for Han Solo, or they're looking for the Millennium Falcon. And I actually think they could have their own little, good adventures. I mean, they can even find a way to tie it in, because I'm going to continue to say this. I think Boba Fett's completely overrated. I don't think he deserves his own movie. I don't think he deserves his own series. I just think he should be more a part of this bounty hunter, whatever you want to say, show, movie, I guess, however you want to look at it. But no, I definitely agree with you. I really do think that they should do more of a bounty hunters TV show kind of thing, because it'd be cool to see all these other bounty hunters that we've never got to see. I mean, we don't we don't know anything about Bosk really, except for the little bit you get to see him in the Clone Wars animated TV show. You don't really know a lot about Dengar. You don't know really a lot about IG-88. We know enough now about Boba, knowing now that he's a clone of his father, how he at that point in time is the fiercest bounty hunter in the galaxy. And again, I don't know why he's such a fan favorite. If it's just because of how he looks, okay, I will give him that. He's not. I'm not going to say he's the worst looking character, but I'm also not going to say he's the most, fierce, the most intimidating of all of them. But I don't see how he's a fan favorite when he gets beaten by a blind man with a stick and falling into the Sarlacc pit. I mean, I have no problem if somebody wants to try to change my mind. I'm pretty stuck on my ways when it comes to Boba Fett. Sorry, man. I actually don't know anything about Forlom, if I can be completely honest with you. If it's like, I'm going to say this, if it's like an expanded universe character, I don't really know a lot about the expanded universe. I'm more caught up with like the canon stuff of Star Wars. Definitely, if it is an EU character, definitely, let me know about it here. But I'll definitely come back to this topic here if you want. But I'm going to want to continue talking about the Rise of Skywalker. So, another really important part of the film I want to talk about is actually everything that happens on the second Death Star. Another part that a lot of people didn't like when it comes to finding the Wayfinder and finding the Sith dagger, trying to actually, get to where they can find this Wayfinder so they can search for Palpatine and go and defeat him. Well, not only, of course, as soon as you walk onto the Death Star with Rey, as soon as she's jumping through, you go through that hallway, you see all the helmets of all the dead stormtroopers. And the closer and closer we get to the throne room, you start hearing the Emperor's theme. And then, of course, when you actually get into that room, you see the throne sitting there. You see the window, the broken window now behind the throne, where, of course, Palpatine was sitting there watching the rebellion lose all their fleets, lose everybody there. Then they open up that side door. Rey has a small little, I guess essentially the way I look at it, a Force vision kind of lightsaber duel, basically fighting herself, trying to avoid that Palpatine part of her, trying to stay true, trying to stay pure to the Force. And there's just something about it, like, because, of course, obviously, as everybody knows, if they're a Kylo Ren fan, the reason Kylo Ren's lightsaber flickers the way it does is because his kyber crystal is cracked, because he tries to make it bleed, but he's still got that confliction inside of him. So he's not purely dark side, but he's also not purely light side. He's like that perfect middle guy, because he wants to do good. He still wants, to be there for his mother. He still feels bad for what he did to Han. But at the same time, he's trying to be Vader's successor. He's trying to be better than Vader. He's trying to essentially now be what Vader never could, being the top guy, now being the supreme leader of the galaxy. Yeah, man, I agree with you. I will say I'm a die-hard Empire fan. Like I love the Empire. It's my favorite faction in the entire series. It kind of broke my heart seeing all them stormtrooper helmets, but at the same time, it was really cool because we haven't seen that essentially, quote unquote, for about 30 years. And then, of course, Kylo gets there. He takes the Wayfinder. He destroys it. Him and Rey start getting into this fierce lightsaber duel because, of course, after her little battle with her dark side Rey, she kind of starts essentially aggressively fighting. It's not that she wants to aggressively fight, but she's basically trying to find out where the Emperor is. She's trying to find a way to beat him. And of course, obviously, Kylo standing in her way. And he's just the best way I can picture it and kind of explain it is in a weird way. He's basically toying with Rey. I mean, you can definitely see it because it's very similar, in my opinion, in some aspects to the lightsaber duel between Luke and Vader on Bespin. Basically, the entirety of the duel, Vader's just toying with Luke, just playing with him, trying to get him to join him, trying to see what he's actually capable of. And then once we start getting more towards the ending of the duel, I'm going to say this. I guess I should have pointed this out too. For me, a lightsaber duel doesn't need to just be amazingly choreographed. Because I'm still going to say it. Vader versus Obi-Wan on Mustafar, hands down, best lightsaber duel in the entire trilogy. Second best lightsaber duel, hands down, you can't even compare it. Luke versus Vader, Return of the Jedi. It's just one of the most emotional duels in the entire series. Third place, I am willingly and honestly putting Rey versus Kylo Ren from Rise of Skywalker. Especially the reason I'm putting it here is because of what is coming up next. So you can, from the way on the other side of the galaxy, Leia can feel that Kylo's losing his strength. He knows that Rey is starting to give in to her dark side, and she's giving in to the dark. She's going to basically kill Kylo Ren. And essentially, she actually does kill Kylo Ren. Because you get the scene where all you see is just the outline of Carrie Fisher's character. And all you just hear really quietly is, Ben. And you see her lay down. She's got the Yavin medal, which I still don't understand why. But she lays down. And as soon as Rey stabs Kylo, you just can feel and just see the heartbreak. Because she can feel that Leia is now gone. And essentially she just says, Leia. And she feels that guilt after essentially actually, again, killing Kylo Ren. She force heals him and says, I wanted to take your hand, but I wanted to take the hand of Ben. She hops in his starfighter, takes off. Moments after that, we get back to that scene after Kylo is force healed from Rey. As he's staring out into the raging ocean, all of a sudden, you just hear, hey, kid. And I'm going to be honest, at first, I seriously thought it was going to be Luke's Force Ghost. But you turn around, it's Han Solo. And a lot of people want to say he's a Force ghost. It's not a Force ghost. Essentially, Kylo is reliving that event that he is just so torn on. He's reflecting on his actual choice of killing his father. And we essentially get the scene that could have possibly played out. We got the scene that kind of would have made the franchise or even just this trilogy almost completely different and really interesting, seeing the person who we thought was going to be the villain turn back to the light. But he feels that guilt of killing Han. He looks at the lightsaber that he used to kill his father, and he throws it into the ocean. And he turns around and he just says, "Dad." Han Solo's gone. Kylo Ren now 100% officially dead. Ben Solo has returned to the light. He rushes off to Exegol to help Rey defeat Palpatine. And even essentially, too, when he gets to Exegol, you get his moments where he's just running through. He's jumping around. He's blasting all these guards. He has his fight with the Knights of Ren, which I'm going to say, man, wow. When he got that lightsaber, he gave that snickering, cocky Solo shrug. The second he starts swinging that lightsaber, first thing I thought of, Episode 3 Anakin. Just the way he was swinging the saber, the way he was elegantly, naturally using that lightsaber like it was his. And then, of course, after Rey takes out all the guards where Palpatine is, Ben shows up, and side by side, fighting together to defeat the evil, is a Skywalker and a Palpatine. Of course, obviously, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the film yet, Ben Solo, unfortunately, dies, becomes one with the Force after giving up the rest of his, I guess we could say his Force essence, putting it into Rey, returning her, bringing her back to life. They share that little moment together. Ben falls, disappears. And again, yeah, this is the most emotional part of the film, and that's honestly, it's not a very popular decision, but on my listing, it's my number 5. Right below it is Return of the Jedi. I actually feel like this film is just more emotionally driven. It's just more emotionally delivered because there's a lot more emotion in it, because that sacrifice from Leia essentially drives the remainder of the story till the end credits. And of course, also, you get that great heart-to-heart between Rey and Luke. You just get basically what JJ is trying to retcon how Luke was in The Last Jedi. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. This isn't right. You need to go. You need to face Palpatine because 1,000 generations live in you now. And then, of course, even during that battle against Palpatine, you get that great moment where she's laying there on the floor at Exegol, and she's looking up, and you hear Obi-Wan, you hear Qui-Gon, you hear Mace Windu, Aayla Secura, Ahsoka, Kanan Jarrus, Anakin Skywalker, Luke Skywalker. The Skywalkers believe in Rey. She is the only hope that's left to save them. And again, yet another perfect reason why it makes sense that she's donning the name of Skywalker. It's not that she's actually taking the name, she's continuing the legacy. And it's just a beautiful thing. And that's why I don't understand why people have such a problem when it comes to at least the Rise of Skywalker, why it's so much more hated. Even though, like I said, for about 15, 20 minutes, you're on Pisana, and then you jump to Kijimi, and then you jump to where the Death Star is, and it's just a lot of planet jumping. I'll give it that. That stuff kind of was more of my mixed feelings because they're just kind of jumping around. It felt very video game-ish, like Jedi Fallen Order, like how in Jedi Fallen Order you go to Bogano to find this artifact, and then you have to go to Dathomir to find another artifact. Then you go to Kashyyyk to find out another thing, and you go back to Bogano. It's just a lot of jumping around planet to planet to planet to find all these different artifacts to tie the story together. If they would have stayed on certain planets for, a bit longer and they were able to kind of make the story flesh out better by being there, it wouldn't have been so bad. But again, as I said too, watching these films back to back to back, I actually think it's actually a very consistent story. Even though, of course, parts of The Rise of Skywalker are obviously trying to retcon everything that happened in The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi, again, if you didn't hear me say it before, I will say it again. The Last Jedi is actually watchable for me, at least personally. And especially, too, if you watch all three of these films back to back to back, I actually really like how it just ties it all together. True, as a Star Wars fan, the sequel trilogy shouldn't be hated sometimes, but at least they did it with passion. I agree. See, like I was saying earlier in the podcast, JJ set it up very good. Everybody's saying it's too much like A New Hope, but if it wouldn't have been, I don't think people would have been as interested, and I don't think they would have wanted to jump in and actually see the film of how it actually is being told. And I don't think people would have been interested. We wouldn't have been able to get sucked back in like we did. And it's so unfortunate of how this trilogy has been. I don't want to say handled. Because I will say, that's still part of my mixed feelings when it comes to The Last Jedi. Is it's almost like JJ wrote it down. He said, "Here, I want you to write this story," and then Rian Johnson wrote his story, and then he passed it back to JJ, and it's just write so many pages. Oh, here, I'm going to write 20 pages. Here, you write 20 pages, and let's just go back and forth, and let's see how this story turns out. That's kind of how it turned out, essentially. But for me, if I had to do like a ranking, of course, obviously, original trilogy is still going to be number one because they are the best of the Star Wars franchise. Like, it's what started the franchise. It's what gave us the prequels, what gave us the sequels, gave us video games, the expanded universe, everything. Every and anything that is Star Wars, no matter what part of it is, we can all agree the original trilogy is the best because it's what started it. It's what the legacy was built on. But again, if I had to do a ranking of the trilogies, I honestly would do original trilogy, sequel trilogy, prequel trilogy. And the reason I put the sequel trilogy above the prequel trilogy is because for me, the sequel trilogy is just a good, fun time. Now, for me, the prequels, the reason I put them lower on my list, it's not because I hate them. I really don't hate them to an extent. Episode 3 is my second favorite Star Wars film of all time because it's just so another, again, emotional story, another perfect way to just, give us and lead us into the original trilogy, how things were led up, how the Jedi were wiped out, how the Empire essentially started, how Darth Vader became Darth Vader. But the first film, The Phantom Menace, is just too political. It's just too silly. It's almost, I guess in a weird way, even too kind of lighthearted, but it's too political. Like older fans back then, like maybe between like 18 to like 40 years old, if they're into the political stuff, they might have liked that stuff. Whereas, as a kid, growing up watching Star Wars, watching the original trilogy, and then getting the prequels, I was excited. I liked them. I liked The Phantom Menace. I liked Attack of the Clones. But now, as I watch them as an adult and a passionate Star Wars fan, they're not enjoyable. Episode 1, again, too political. The only saving graces of the film, the pod race on Tatooine, and the duel of fates between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul. Episode 2, it's too much of a love story. Like, I understand we want to show the lighter side of Anakin Skywalker and kind of maybe what draws him into being Vader, which of course essentially is what draws him into being Vader. But it's just the cringe-worthy moments in Attack of the Clones what I don't like. When we start actually getting to Geonosis is when obviously the film really starts to pick up. Everything that happens on Kamino is actually very interesting. But the weakest part of the film is Anakin and Padme and their weird, like I said, cringe-worthy relationship. Except I will say, and I think a lot of Star Wars fans will agree, the entire scene where Anakin goes to look for his mom, finds her at the Tusken Raider camp. She dies, kills all the Tusken Raiders. I like that scene. That was, for me, personally, the only good Anakin scene. And then, of course, when the clones start coming to Geonosis and start attacking, I liked all of that. When we get to the lightsaber duel, though, I wasn't a fan of the lightsaber duel. I think it's the weakest out of all the lightsaber duels in the entire series, personally. And even though Yoda is and will forever be my favorite character in this franchise, I cannot stand him with a lightsaber. Like, again, Revenge of the Sith, it's a little bit more passable because, of course, it's becoming the climax of like the end of the Jedi, essentially. Like, it's going to be what officially kills, what makes Yoda go to Dagobah, go into exile, remain there for 20 years, and eventually get over it and train Luke for, obviously, of course, not very long. The sequel trilogy is so underrated. The sequel trilogy, again, is a fun time. It does, for me, have a good story. It actually has very good and interesting characters. I actually find Rey to be very interesting because essentially when we first meet her, she's a character who doesn't even know what she wants to do with her life. She doesn't know who she is, where she belongs. what she wants to do. She's just basically trying to find her worth, her value in the galaxy, in the world. Finn, he doesn't like the world that he's in, so he makes an escape, and he finds out that there's a rebellion to fight against what he just escaped, and he does not hesitate to join. Paul, of course, he's just, basically forced, in a sense, I guess we could say, into joining the fight. Because, of course, his mother, who worked with Luke Skywalker, went on a couple missions with Luke Skywalker, was a reason why Poe joins the Resistance and wants to fight against the First Order. Supreme Leader Snoke, especially in The Force Awakens, very interesting character. Of course, we don't know a lot about him. Of course, we obviously find out in Episode 9 that he's a clone. Again, not really the biggest fan of that, but obviously we can't do anything about it. The films are out. The saga is done. But now we're going to be getting into this new version of Star Wars coming soon. I believe it was in the next year and a half or 2 years or something like that. We're getting the High Republic. And I will only say, I'm a fan of Jedi. I'm a fan of the Force. But for me personally, you don't need the Jedi. You don't need the Force. You just need a good, solid Star Wars story with the perfect amount of action and the perfect amount of story. Thus, you get The Mandalorian. Perfect blend of story, humor, storytelling, action, everything. Perfect. And maybe once I start learning a little bit more about, the High Republic, because I'll be honest, I've never played the Knights of the Old Republic. I don't know anything about the Old Republic or anything else of Jedi of past. I'm just more canon Star Wars fan. It's not that I have anything against the expanded universe or the Legends continuity or anything. I don't know anything about it to enjoy it. Like my buddy B-Level Star Wars, he is an expanded universe fan, and he's taught me a few things here and there about it, and I'd like to learn a lot more. I'm working on getting him here onto the podcast to share with me and share with you guys of all of the other things out there of Star Wars lore, I guess we could say. But getting back to the sequel trilogy, man, I wish it wasn't so hated. I really wish that people would just really look at it. I feel like maybe this was just my opinion. It took me a bit to do this, but if you watch the films, like I said, back to back to back, there might be something in there that you like. You might think a little bit differently of the trilogy. I'm not saying you need to watch prequel trilogy first, and then the original trilogy, and then the sequel trilogy to tie everything together. Just watch the sequel trilogy as a whole. Just sit down one whole day, devote, I guess what would it be, about 8-9 hours of your day. Watch all the films, really take notes, take in what's going on your screen. Really look at how the characters are portrayed. Look at what they're doing, how they're doing it, how they feel about doing it. And just take the time to appreciate what's on your screen. Again, it's not that they need to be the best looking movies, because that's not what making films is about. Making films is about telling a very good story and having it be told in a perfect pace, in a sense, and having a great outcome that everybody can enjoy. Of course, obviously, the biggest thing about making films is you're never going to please anybody. And that was the biggest thing about the sequel trilogy, is obviously, if you're a Star Wars fan, and I'm going to loosely use the word fan. If it's not your Star Wars, don't jump on and start talking trash about it. If it's not your Star Wars, just push it out to the side and be like, yeah, okay, I didn't like that. But when you got guys coming on and they just give all the reasons of why it's garbage, why it sucks, why it's this, why it's that, why it retcons Return of the Jedi, why it just does all these things that have been built up throughout the franchise. It doesn't. It's a personal prerogative. It's just a different taking on the Skywalkers. It's continuing the Skywalker story. Because essentially episodes 1 through 6 is Anakin's story. Episodes 7 through 9 is essentially the story of the Skywalker children. And yes, I'm going to say the Skywalker children might not have been in it as much as people wanted. They might have thought that all the Skywalker stuff was watered down, was not done well, was not this, was not that. They were just telling a different story. They were telling a different outcome. Yes, I do still think, though, obviously, the sequel trilogy would have been done better if it would have just been done by one person, whether it had been Rian Johnson, whether it had been J.J. Abrams, or anybody else who's been involved with the trilogy. But there is, I still feel personally, there is still something in the sequel trilogy for everybody to enjoy. I have a lot of friends who are, of course, obviously, they're just casual Star Wars fans. They're not big into it like me. They don't have a personal connection to it like I do. It's just more of a, I just like this movie because I like this movie. And that's fine. That's cool. If that's what you want to like, I have no problem with that. Of course, obviously, I can't get into, a deep discussion about this kind of stuff with them. That's why I continue to put podcasts out, because I can talk to everybody else about it, because everybody out there who is a Star Wars fan can agree and kind of like see where I'm coming from. And then again, we can have good, lively discussions, and we can even share ideas, much like that Star Wars guy here has shared about making a bounty hunters movie, or having everybody could even make up their own Star Wars story, essentially. I've had a few that I've wrote. I'm even working on right now. I have one called Star Wars Forces of Fate. Essentially, my story, I'm going to make it into a trilogy, but I'm not going to share everything about it. But the story takes place during the events of the sequel trilogy. I also am working on a book called March to the Temple, which takes place literally minutes after Darth Vader is officially born. The Darth Vader that we know. He goes on a killing spree looking for the Jedi, going back to the temple because, of course, the Jedi got that transmission from Obi-Wan. Everybody don't return to the temple. But he wants to go by Jedi. It's one Jedi, two Padawans. They like to go to the temple. They want to find out what is actually going on. Where, of course, obviously, spoiler alert, which obviously you guys should know, Darth Vader's there waiting, and he's basically out for blood. That's about all I can do without actually, telling you guys my story, because I don't want my ideas taken. But that's just how big of a Star Wars fan that I've become. That I've been able to actually make stories, and I can talk lore with people. Thank you, that Star Wars guy. I greatly appreciate that. But even I can talk to even semi-casual fans where they're just more, they like it and they want to get into it, but they're just more of it's just a movie. but you're able to get their opinion on things, like even, oh yeah, I think, if this would have happened and this would have happened, it would have been a little better. And even a diehard Star Wars fan like me looks at them and goes, yeah, actually it does. That's actually a really good idea. But like, us diehard Star Wars fans, we can come up with our own story. Again, my friend B-level Star Wars, even though I know it was meant more as like, a joke and for fun, but him and a bunch of other Star Wars fans made their own kind of parody version of The Rise of Skywalker. And I watched it. I jumped in. It was a fun little time. We were just, messing around, making up just all these random things, but a lot of people can actually come up with their own stories. And again, the sequel trilogy is what inspired me to do this, because immediately after Revenge of the Sith came out, about I want to say about July, maybe August of 2005, till about August of 2014, I became a casual Star Wars fan. I liked the movies. I wasn't so die hard into them like I am now, where it's like essentially, almost in a weird way, consumed my life. Trust me, a lot of people at my work, and even sometimes in my personal life, they get kind of sick of me talking about Star Wars and showing them Star Wars stuff. But the sequel trilogy brought me back into this world of Star Wars. It's what made me want to write these novels. Maybe even if someday I can kind of get up there, if I can maybe even get the funds, maybe even make them into fan films, which a lot of people have done as well. You, of course, have Star Wars Theory. He made a Vader fan film. He's still got a few more episodes coming out. Grade A plus from a Star Wars fan. And, of course, I'm not just going to say, the sequel trilogy, gave him that oomph to do it, but that's just how much this franchise means. And that's why I also really enjoy the sequel trilogy as much as I do, because it's brought my love of Star Wars back. That Star Wars guy asks, what do you think about Jedi Fallen Order 2 being confirmed? I'm actually kind of glad somebody's asked me that question, because I did want to make a video and or a podcast about that as well. I loved Fallen Order. It was very, very fun. Me personally, I actually think instead of making an entirely brand new game, I think they should just release some DLCs, in all honesty, because I actually enjoyed the game. Like, it's very fun. I streamed the game on my channel. If you guys haven't seen it, you guys should go and check it out. Again, another good just Star Wars story in general. Cameron Monaghan actually does a very good job. That ending is just insane. That whole final part when you're on Fortress Inquisitorius is insane. The story is fleshed out. You get kind of a more inner lookings of the Force, kind of like all these different elements of people using the Force here and what this Jedi Master was looking for there. I mean, don't get me wrong. If a Jedi Fallen Order 2 comes out, no hesitation. I'm going to pre-order it day one when it comes to being able to be pre-ordered. Because essentially what I did when I found out they were making a actual campaign Jedi Force user based Star Wars game. Because I get a lot of criticism for this. I've never played any of the Force Unleashed games. I bought them. I'm not even joking. Like, I bought them right after Fallen Order came out, and I wanted to play them. Unfortunately, I don't have cords for my PlayStation 3, so they're just been sitting there collecting dust. Everybody says that they're phenomenal games. The first one is amazing. Apparently, the second one's not as good. But you also get the guy who voices Darth Maul in the Clone Wars and the Rebels TV shows, and it's Sam Witwer playing Starkiller. So I want to see that because Sam Witwer is actually not a bad actor. I actually think he's a very good actor. He's a very good voice actor. Obviously, he does very good in the Clone Wars TV show, which I'm also very torn on if I want to watch it because I thought it was season 3, but I actually looked again. I got to the very first episode of season 4 and I stopped watching the show because it was just too boring for me. I couldn't get into the show. I couldn't really enjoy it. Like it wasn't sucking me in like the movies were. I'm going to 100% say this though. This new season, I watched the trailer for it. It looks really good. I see all these people reviewing each and every single episode, and they're saying it is absolutely phenomenal. The animation looks really good. A clip I just watched today, the episode that just came out today, The Phantom Apprentice, it's called. I believe it's like episode 7, 10 or something like that. Everybody's saying it's the best, the best episode of the Clone Wars ever. And I'm happy for them Star Wars fans because, like I said, I hear people praise the Clone Wars TV show up and down. People saying this is the best version of Darth Maul. Saying Ahsoka is probably one of the best original characters ever made. I disagree. I'm not the biggest fan of Ahsoka. But it's weird. I don't really like Ahsoka, but I like her portrayal a little more in Rebels. I've never seen Rebels, but I've watched the clips of her. I've watched her lightsaber duel with Vader. So I'm really torn. I want to watch it because I feel like I'm missing out on something with the Star Wars community. Like I'm a big fan of the micro series that came out back in, I believe it was 2003. It had that like Samurai Jack animation. And even though they were only 10-minute long episodes, they were still very well done. The duel between Asajj Ventress and Anakin Skywalker on that jungle planet was very well done. It's also even hands down probably one of, if not the best versions of General Grievous. He's intimidating. He's scary. Especially that very first scene that you see him in. It's just it's literally like you're almost sitting there watching a horror movie because he's just hunting down all these characters. He kills a guy who looks like Shaggy, aka B-level Star Wars. If you end up watching this B-level, love you, man. Couldn't help myself with that one, but there are just things about it I like, and that's the things I don't like about the Clone Wars animated TV show that's happening now is I don't like the portrayal of Grievous. He's literally a coward. Like anytime there's more than just one person there, he bolts. He's gone. That's it. You don't see him. Count Dooku. It's going to sound so horrible the way I'm going to word this, but his face is so bad looking and so just distracting. Like I can't get over it. The voice actor does a very good job at doing a close late great Christopher Lee impression. the guy who plays Obi-Wan, I think his name is like James Arnold Taylor or something. He does not do a bad job as Obi-Wan. Matt Lanter playing Anakin, it's too distracting for me. I think that's also another reason I don't like it is because I can't get behind Anakin. Because the Anakin in there, he just seems too lighthearted. Because of course, it was a show intentionally made for kids. But I couldn't get into the actual character of Anakin Skywalker in this. And I'm not the biggest fan of Ahsoka, and I think it's just because of watching her the first few seasons that I watched her in. She just reminded me too much of Episode 2 Anakin, and I'm gonna say this. Over Boba Fett, over Jar Jar Binks, over Rose Tico, even over Episode 1 Anakin. Episode 2 Anakin Skywalker is my least favorite character in all of Star Wars. Which I know some people will think that's a little weird because I like Episode 3 Anakin the most out of all the Anakins. Darth Vader, second favorite all-time favorite Star Wars character of them all. But Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker. Yeah, but he's just portrayed so differently. He's all the things that people say Kylo Ren is. He's a whiny baby. He's very temperamental. He throws a fit over every little thing. Yeah, that's probably why I'm too scared, but the clips I've seen of this version of the Clone Wars, like Ahsoka, I will willingly say it. Ahsoka actually looks a lot better in here. And I don't know, again, if it's the animation. Not that, again, like I said earlier, it's not like the visuals that are going to draw me in. I'm also very interested in watching this season because, again, it ties in directly with Revenge of the Sith. This episode that just came out takes place during and even after Anakin kills Dooku. And right before and right after the council addresses Anakin and says, we want you to essentially spy on the Chancellor. And it also takes place right before Obi-Wan goes to Utapau and his big, wild adventure with General Grievous. That's probably why I'm honestly more interested in watching this season than any other season. A lot of people have told me, oh, the show gets better after Maul shows up. I will only say I skipped to the Maul episode. Like, that was one of the first episodes I actually sat down and watched. And I don't know. I wasn't too into it. It felt too... How do I want to word it? It was very, like, witchcrafty. It seemed more like I was watching Star Wars mixed with, like, Harry Potter. I was watching Star Potter or Harry Wars, I guess we could say, as weird as them both sound. So, anyway, you guys, I know I kind of, like, just veered completely off topic again. This was supposed to be me defending the sequel trilogy. But, again, to kind of get back onto the topic once again, the sequel trilogy is very underrated. It should not get the hate that it gets. The actors do very well in this trilogy. The characters they portray are very, very well done. Kylo Ren, again, I'm going to continue to say this. Best character in the entire trilogy. I actually think Rey is a very good, well-rounded character, even though, you know, her ending arc, her ending part of the trilogy, very still torn on. I don't think she should have been a Palpatine. I still do think she should have just been a nobody, but I've come to accept the fact that she's now a Palpatine. And it also, I don't care what anybody says, it didn't retcon Anakin's redemption story. It really, really didn't, though. The sequel trilogy might not be for everybody, but it does not deserve the hate that it's received over the last 5 years of existence. Give it a chance. If it's not your thing, okay. But again, like I said, devote 8 to 9 hours of your day. Watch them back to back to back. Write down notes, write down things you like, things you don't like, things that tie nicely together in all 3 films. And just show it some love, man. Again, it's not your thing, it's not your thing. But it does not deserve all the hate that it gets. So, guys, that is going to do it for this episode of the Midwest Cantina podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you guys hit that like button if you like the sequel trilogy, or even just hit the like button if you just overall enjoyed the video. And let me know down in the comment section below, what else would you guys like to see? I actually would like to do a podcast about maybe the Clone Wars micro series versus Clone Wars animated show. But again, I need to just really take the time. I really need to devote myself into watching it. I also, rewatching and listening to my podcast, I said I was going to do a review of The Mandalorian. I want to dedicate an entire podcast to The Mandalorian, reviewing each episode, talking about the show, talking about the future of the show. See you later, that Star Wars guy. Thank you so much for tuning in and being very lively here in the chat. So those are 2 I definitely would like to do. I know for sure the Mandalorian one I definitely want to work towards. So let me know if it's something you guys are interested in. And with that, guys, again, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, turn on the notification bells, and we'll see you later.